Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2026 Performance Enablement Shift, HR's role in the AI era. With so much going on in the world, in your lives, I'm sure in your organizations, we are tremendously thankful that you are spending an hour with us today and taking the time to learn and hear from our amazing speakers. As AI really continues to shape how we work, how work gets done, organizations are being forced to really rethink what high performance actually looks like. Many of you may have just wrapped up maybe your end of year reviews, maybe you're doing them this month or have a different cadence, but traditional reactive performance management really just can't keep up with the pace of change that we're all going through. And so instead, we're seeing this shift towards performance enablement, which is exactly what today's session is all about. We would love to hear from you all. How would you describe your current performance management approach? And this is a safe space, so feel free to be honest in that poll. But we'll give you all a few minutes to answer that while I introduce today's speaker, Jamie Aitken, who will be guiding us through today's conversation. Jamie is the VP of HR Transformation here at Betterworks, where she helps organizations reimagine employee performance management through proven systems and processes. She brings over 25 years of HR leadership experience, spanning organizational development, HR transformation, and employee engagement across multiple industries. Jamie's also the co-author of Make Work Better and a McKinsey certified facilitator with deep expertise in global talent practice redesign, large-scale cultural transformation, executive coaching, and change management. In short, Jamie's really been at the center of this shift long before it's become a headline, and we're really excited for her to share her insights with us today. And so I will bring Jamie onto the stage, and I will pass it over. And everyone, welcome Jamie Aitken to the stage.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thrilled to be here, and I'm dialing in from Nova Scotia, Canada, which surprisingly is 3 degrees warmer than Jacksonville, Florida, by the sounds of it. We're sitting at 52 today, but we've got a storm coming in. I'm thrilled to be here today. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and at the heart of it is something we've been talking about in HR for a very, very long time. And I'm seeing some great movement towards this shift from traditional performance management to performance enablement. So I'm going to talk to you about that today. I'm specifically going to talk to you about it from the perspective of key stakeholders in your organization and the behavioral shifts that we're needing them to make in order to have a sustainable transformation and to move firmly towards continuous performance. And I'm also going to, because sometimes me talking is not enough to bring it to life. So my colleague Sam is going to be showing you exactly what that can look like in practice. So without further ado, let's talk about it. As David mentioned, this I love this term VUCA, this notion that the world is a crazy place right now. There's lots of volatility, lots of uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity. There's an awful lot of things, whether it's AI or a host of other reasons, why there is just a lot of unknowns going on in the world right now and in organizations as well. But we're finding, as we're talking through to a lot of different organizations and HR leaders, that the companies that are really navigating well through this environment are the ones that are focusing on accountability, agility, and being able to pivot as things change, being lean and efficient, as well as being ready for the next change. So, in the chat, I'd love to hear from you if this resonates and if there are anything that you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen it speaks to you in terms of some of the elements that your organization is facing right now in terms of, calls for more efficiency or agility, et cetera. Now, balancing that is this huge appetite, which has only been growing over the last few years, that our employees, whether they be at any level in the organization, but our employees are striving for meaningful work. They want to know that what they're doing in their job is contributing to the greater good, that in some way they can see a line between what their contributions are doing and how that relates to what the business is trying to achieve. So goal setting and tracking that and making sure that you're on point is really resonating as an important aspect for our employees. They also want to understand how they're making, what progress they're making on those. And they really want coaching from their managers to help them maybe with challenges they're having, achieving that progress, and helping the manager or having the manager help them get that out of any challenges out of the way. They're also looking for feedback. We know this is a big aspect of what employees are asking for. They don't want less feedback, they want more. And they don't just want it from their managers, they also want it from their peers, maybe somebody who's running a project that they're working on for a short period of time. Feedback and rich feedback is king. Because part of what the third element is about allowing employees to have growth opportunities within the organization. And there's a big hunger to get the feedback that they need to say, where can I go next? And so talent mobility is starting to become a topic in a lot of conversations, more so than I've seen in my decades in HR. So how do you balance those two things? Well, I think performance enablement allows us to do that. So on the left hand of the screen, I'm thinking this describes in a nutshell what traditional performance management looks like, which is very much a top-down exercise. It's about control, and it's very reactive, always looking behind to see what we've accomplished, as opposed to this shift to enablement, which is about empowering our employees and managers, having continuous conversation throughout the year so that there's no surprises, and for it to be very proactive. So you hear terms like feed forward as opposed to feedback. You talk about managers and employees having conversations about what the next steps are. These are all aspects of enablement. So in my job, I get to talk with HR leaders all the time. And so I've had this conversation a lot, which has helped me sort of identify what I think are the key challenges for each of these groups in terms of driving shifts across the organization. And managers, just so you know, managers are usually the first group or the most important group that folks are identifying. So we're going to talk about each of these stakeholders, why it's challenging for each of them, and then what can we do as HR leaders to help them make that the shift that they need to in order to move into the space of continuous performance enablement. So for managers, it is truly moving the mindset from I'm an evaluator to my job as a coach. For employees, it's about moving from this is something that's done to me, so I'm a passive recipient, as opposed to being actively engaged in the experience. For HR, so I noticed there was only 3 votes here. We'll talk a little bit more about this. I think there's a lot that HR needs to be shifting, but we really need to be shifting from owning the process of performance management or enablement to building and curating an experience and focusing on the outcomes that we need from the experience. And from leaders, we really need them to move from this notion of delegating it to HR. This is something that HR does, and they're responsible for it, to really being a cultural steward and understanding that if we get performance right in our organization, it's going to drive business results. So let's get into it. So for managers, and I'm not suggesting these are the only shifts that need to happen. I would suggest these are probably the most fundamental shifts that have to happen. I'm happy to do another webinar on each of these in a deep dive. But for today, I'm just going to talk about that, what I think are the key elements. So for managers, this notion of moving from an evaluator to a coach. So why is it challenging? Well, most managers, first of all, are promoted for technical competence. They're incredibly good at what they do, but not necessarily when they move into a leadership role, do they have the coaching ability? It's not something that they've been trained to do as part of their role in the past. And I can share with you, I used to work for a very large aerospace company. We had a lot of engineers, and we would have engineers that would, have 20, 30, 40 people reporting into them, also engineers, but the leaders had never been trained on being a good coach. So while they could talk about the technical aspects, they weren't necessarily as strong in terms of their coaching ability. And so they, as a lot of managers, feel the pressure to just jump in and solve the problem quickly, as opposed to allowing this space to let your employees come in and solve it themselves with your coaching. And coaching also requires EQ, patience, and a mindset shift, not just the skills. So what we see as we evolve this shift over time is supporting managers with this notion that it's not just something that you can go into a classroom for an afternoon and learn about how to be a good coach. This is something that takes time. I like to say frequency builds competency. So the idea is to ease them over time with this notion that they move into being a coach. So how do you make it happen? Well, first of all, and it gets to what I was saying before, this is not necessarily, I'm not saying all classroom training is bad, but I think in the moment tools that can help when they need it, and Sam will show you some examples of this a little later on, that helps them with conversation guides, giving them coaching questions that may be relevant, and templates to help build their confidence and competence over time is something that we can do. I know in the past, I've been very much guilty of, creating a beautiful little workbook, handing it out in a classroom setting, and then stunned 3 weeks later or 6 months later when all of our leaders didn't become amazing coaches. This is something that takes time, but we in HR need to help support that growth and development over time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's also about modeling it visibly. So when you have senior leaders or peers showing their coaching style through videos or in fact in live sessions, it makes it a little bit, frankly, more normalized, as in, this is something that I could do as well. And oh, by the way, this is something that I think I can now try and tackle myself. But it starts to normalize that actually being a coach and not just jumping in and fixing is the way we do business here now. Measuring and recognizing, in all good change management strategies, there comes a point where yes, you will enable your stakeholders to ensure that they understand and are supported in making this shift. But at a certain point in change management, it's also about accountability. And so while we recognize that this is an evolution that happens over time, we also need to understand that at a certain point, we hold people accountable to that coaching behavior, again, over time. We don't want this to feel something that is threatening. Rather, it's something that they grow into, but we set a standard and we expect over time that people reach it. For employees, it's about moving them from this notion of this is something my boss does to me, or this is something HR is telling us all to do. And they're used to seeing it that way. It's something that's done to them as opposed to something that they are an active participant in. And many don't feel empowered to, initiate feedback for themselves or have any say in the establishment of their own goals. And there's some uncertainty about what's allowed or expected. Is this what managers are going to help me with? Or is HR going to help me with, as opposed to really seeing that, in fact, they become their own talent developers, which is the shift that we want them to do. So we want them to become an active participant, not only in their performance, not only in establishing and having a say in the goals. Now, that may be in the conversation that they have with their managers, but that they have a say in crafting the goals that they're focused on. But it's also about recognizing that, they are also a very, very much a part of their career growth and their career development. And so they need to be much more active in seeking not only feedback, but asking for additional sessions around, I'm struggling with a particular goal. I need some coaching from you, manager, to help me overcome the challenges that I've got in my way. So here's an interesting one. HR, from process owner to experienced designer. So HR traditionally has been structured with this notion of being a compliance organization. And if you think back to the early days where HR was called personnel, it was really about risk and compliance. And HR was set up for that mindset. And I still see it when I'm talking to some HR organizations. I still see this notion that it's really about, did we focus on the process? Was the process completed? How many PMP performance reviews did we complete through the year? These are the words and the conversations I have when an HR person is still very much associated and attached to the process itself. And so the metrics they think about are, again, very much associated with the process. Many HR teams, although I see this changing, lack design thinking or user experience capabilities. And I think over probably the last 6 or 7 years, HR has started employing design thinking approaches when they think about recrafting the employee experience around performance and other HR processes as well. I've done another webinar on design thinking for HR that I think we'd be able to add to the link or the follow-up email as well if you're interested. But I think it really unlocks the idea that we are designing for the end user, as opposed to from a compliance perspective, i.e., we need to do these 3 things that we need to check off and finish to complete the process. So shifting from process completion to this notion of human-centered impact and business outcomes. I'll talk a little bit about this later on in the organization. It requires a new way for HR to be thinking and working. And I hope this resonates with you, because I think this is a stakeholder group that many of us in HR miss. And it's easy. I've done that poll many, many times. I think it's very easy to identify managers, employees, and potentially leaders in this. But I think we miss the fact that HR needs to make some shifts as well. I mentioned design thinking and co-creating with users. Imagine if instead of, and I've been guilty of this too, sitting in a room with my HR colleagues and designing a process, and us high-fiving each other because we think we did a great thing, flinging it over the fence to our employees and managers, and then wondering why it was not being adopted. Well, part of the reason is we didn't create the space and open the door to have some of our end users actually come in and help co-create with us. And again, here we go with the accountability piece again. It's measuring the experience and the business outcomes. So it's not just about how many forms we got completed. Did we get 100% on our talent review conversations? But more about, did we increase productivity for the organization? Did we have a higher percentage of goal completion this year than last? Are we, in fact, affecting in a positive way, not only productivity, but employee retention. These are the types of things we need to be thinking about. And I'd be interested in the chat. If you are doing this type of work right now, kudos to you. But just know if you're not, you're in good company with a lot of HR organizations that are just starting to think about this. Okay, let's shift to leaders, because if HR starts sort of lessening the grip on the ownership of process, then that allows leaders. Well, first, if they lessen the grip, somebody needs to pick it up. And what I would suggest is that leaders of your organization, your CFO, your CEO, et cetera, they need to stop assuming that it is an HR process, that HR is managing it, but rather it's an important aspect of what I call this is how we do business here. And why that's challenging is that traditionally that hasn't been the case. It's always been HR's job or something our managers do. Again, you see this notion of if it's not a problem, then I'm going to avoid it. And it requires proactive involvement in culture shaping, which many leaders weren't trained to do. But if you take the idea that the reason that the leaders will take this on and be a cultural steward to this notion that performance of our people actually is good for business, then they start doing a completely different activity or shift. They start creating visibility. So dashboards showing enablement behaviors, i.e., how many people are doing check-ins? How many divisions in our organization are having continuous conversations and having coaching sessions that our employees are giving feedback that are very helpful? Well, what would that do for your organization? If your organization as a whole has strong alignment with what you as a leader have set for your business priorities, and everybody understands that alignment and is focused on it and is enabled to perform to such that the productivity and the achievement of those business objectives happen, I, as a leader, can make the connection, obviously, that performance of our people is going to help make the organization achieve its business results. And those are the kinds of aha moments for leaders where they stop thinking about performance as something that HR does to us, and rather it's something that we do here because it helps not only the individuals at our organization, but it also helps us achieve our business objectives. So I've been talking for a little bit here. I thought it would be really helpful at this point to actually move from concept to practice. And so the first one, we talked about managing performance to enabling it. We talked about moving from static processes to a continuous flow and alignment, and from evaluation to clarity and ownership. So let's see where that enablement starts. Pass it to you, Sam.
Thanks, Jamie, and thanks, everyone. I'm thrilled to take you through part of Betterworks' solution for driving alignment and clarity around what folks are working on. So as I start sharing my screen, much like our attendees today, I'm going to be focusing in on the manager. And one of the aspects of the Betterworks platform, our goal tracking, means that managers and employees have real-time visibility into how they're tracking. And so Michelle, our manager here, has clear visibility into what she's accountable for, as well as a dashboard directly telling her how her team is performing on their goals. And I also saw in the chat how important it is to drive good goal practice and alignment from the top down. And so I'll also take a second just to show you some of the really powerful views that Betterworks provides when you're considering a goal alignment methodology. And quite frankly, just having a place to house things like your top company goals and put a priority on them. But beyond that, you're able to actually drive alignment by cascading goals through the organization from layer to layer so that folks can see very clearly how the work that they're doing directly contributes to one of those top line company goals. And so whether I, as a user, am directly contributing to a goal, meaning as I update progress throughout the quarter, it will automatically update the progress to the top company goal, or as an individual, I can actually just align or I can actually just associate or relate to one of those top company goals. And so again, the power there is both the combination of directly contributing. I can see exactly how my work is contributing to the greater good, but it's also illuminating to me as the user how important the work is that I'm doing. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on how effective our goal creation can be. So as that coach, as opposed to a manager, we do provide the ability to co-create your goals with the employee. They can be agile, meaning as goals become less important, they can be moved out or adjusted. And as priorities change, so can the goals. But one of the really powerful pieces for both employee and manager, our AI Goal Assist, it's going to be looking through all of the good information that it knows about our manager as well as the employee, all in an effort to really assist the goal creation process so that we're focusing more on the coaching and the development as opposed to getting stuck on that blank page. Oh, what am I going to be tracking this quarter for goals? And so just thinking back on the goal module here at Betterworks, we're really keen on driving that alignment, that clarity on how folks are affecting those top company goals, and all around making your managers change ready so that they can face whatever the next quarter brings them. At this point, I'll invite Jamie to hop back in, and you'll hear from me in a little bit as I rejoin the conversation and share how Betterworks can help with our topics.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, so now let's talk about, because we talked about it in the poll a little bit, managers as coaches and employees as owners. And I thought I'd share a story, particularly as it relates to employees as owners. And when I say owners, I mean of their career, of their development, of their accomplishments and goal attainment. So when I was working in that aerospace company, we had a lot of misaligned, shall I say, when we started. We had a traditional performance management. Goals were established sometime they were supposed to be January, but sometimes it would be March until those goals were communicated. And employees always felt, a lot of feedback to HR that they didn't know what they were supposed to be working on, et cetera. But there was also, I think, a struggle that they were not understanding what they were doing and how it was connected to what the business was trying to achieve. So what we were encouraging employees to do was to request conversations with their managers and have that level all the way up to the top, because sometimes organizations are not that agile. I'm trying to be kind here at communicating the goals at the beginning of the year or whatever your cadence is. And so what that did was it actually, over time, it created a tension that really brought to bear to the leadership team that, in fact, oh gosh, you know what? We've created a situation where, in fact, there's a gap. And it's only because we haven't been as diligent or as disciplined around the idea that our employees need to hear so that they can craft the goals that they need to focus on. And so it actually created a bit of friction until such time as we got a lot better at the leadership level crafting those goals. So employees can own not just their own development and their own achievement, but in some cases, and I hear this a lot, that sometimes the goals of the year can actually take a couple of months to get articulated. And in those cases, if you encourage your employees to have those conversations, so really take ownership of it, that can help make a cultural shift of its own. I'm curious and would love to see in the chat if any of you experience this lag for goals in the organization that, say, if you start in January and you're not seeing them until February, March. I've heard it from a lot of HR organizations that is the case. And so while we can do what we do in HR, I think it's also important to have that tension created with the employees as well. It becomes a bit of a wake-up call for leaders and the behavioral shift that they need to make as well. But performance shifts when managers coach and employees take ownership. So let's talk about why coaching is hard for managers then, because they were never set up to coach. We know that managers are under pressure, and this idea that this is just one more thing that managers have to do. One of the many refrains that I hear the most is that continuous performance management means that our managers are having to have more conversations instead of just once or twice a year. Oh my goodness, they'll kill us. They don't have any time. But the idea here, which Sam is going to show you a little bit, is if we make it easy and if we make it simple and if we remove the administrative burden of a traditional performance management process, we make it lighter and more agile, and we help enable them over time, just in time, then they're able to build that competency over time. And it is something that is built over, the hard part is that we just assume everybody's going to be a good coach, which in fact is not the case. Frequency builds competency, and support in the moment is what's going to help your managers become better coaches. It won't happen overnight, but having a continuous approach to this allows them multiple times throughout the year to build that muscle. And if you don't give any structure to it, coaching becomes something that's inconsistent or just downright avoided because people are uncomfortable with not being able to do it in a confident way, if that makes sense. And HR has a role in this because we have to acknowledge this is not just about pulling managers, as I said before, into a classroom and giving them a 2-hour course on how to be a good coach. You really need to enable coaching by creating consistency. You need to provide guidance instead of relying on an individual manager's skill. So if you see that parts of your organization are doing this really well, then they become your sponsors. And the parts of the organization that are not, or maybe struggling a bit, that's when you double down on your enablement with that particular group so that you're not peanut buttering a learning across everybody in the organization. You're really becoming strategic about where you provide that support. And you're reinforcing coaching behaviors. You're not just about the outcome. So it's not just about process completion. It's about how well did your employees or your team respond to your ability as a coach? Like how meaningful was it to your team? And you can ask questions and poll your employees about that. But again, I'm going to pass it over to Sam because I think it's important for us to talk about it, but also to see it and what that would look like. So the first thing we're going to talk about is coaching and ownership requires better conversations. We know annual reviews are too slow. And when I say annual reviews, I mean the kickoff at the beginning of the year, maybe a mid-year conversation around the spring, summertime, and then the absolutely fraught with angst end of year conversation that you have with your boss. They're too slow because the goals that you've set at the beginning of the year may be completely redundant by March or April or May. And so you may have a group of folks that are looking to you for feedback, but the goals that they have were redundant 6 months ago. So it's too slow. It's not agile enough. Ad hoc conversations are too inconsistent. And enablement really truly depends on frequent, high quality check-ins. So so the question then becomes, how do we make great performance conversations easy and consistent? So I'm going to pass it over to Sam.
Thanks, Jamie. And again, y'all, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to show you how Betterworks can help with our topics today. And then Jamie will come back up and continue the webinar. So let's revisit our manager, Michelle, here, and how can we really enable her in continuous conversations throughout the year. Before we show you how the conversations themselves act, I want to talk about how managers actually prepare for these conversations and one-on-ones. Right on their homepage, as we've seen previously, your managers have a dashboard of everything they need to know for their employees. That's their goals, the conversations that we're about to look at. They do have the ability to send a proactive nudge for those that maybe are tardy on filling out their part of the conversation. But probably the most powerful is they can actually generate an AI-provided feedback summary right from their homepage. And again, when we think about managers with 10, 20 direct reports, flat out getting ready and making sure that we're showing up the way that we want to can be a lot. And so just by providing the right tools for your managers, that includes certainly AI and making sure that we're enabling them with the most powerful, and that's going to be information. And so again, as managers are preparing for these, they do have things like a summary of all of the feedback that Damon has received to make sure that they're bringing their best selves to these coaching conversations. The coaching conversations themselves happen in two ways. So we're looking at a scheduled example. As Jamie mentioned, these can happen continuously throughout the year on a monthly, quarterly basis, whatever the cadence is best for your organization. But when we think about a really quality coaching conversation, there's some elements that I'd like to pull out for you. The first is on the right, all of Damon's answers are going to be visible as Michelle is responding to this get together. We also have visibility into Damon's goals, again, providing the what Damon is working on. And these are in real time. So as we have gotten together throughout the quarter for our one-on-ones, both manager and employee are aware of if these goals are green, tracking well, or red, we need to double down with some resources. Something else I'll draw your attention to, as the manager is actually responding and coaching in the review itself, they also have AI to look over their shoulder and basically give them some pointers before they actually submit their response. So in this example, there is a ton of slang being used, probably not the most professional response. And so we have AI to look over our shoulder, tell me a better way, a more effective way to get my point across. But even more powerful, it's going to be coaching our managers on why it made that suggestion, enabling me to become a better coach as I continue to do my reviews and interact with employees. So this provides a really great foundation for managers to be continuous, to be in the moment in terms of knowing how their employees are tracking. But probably even more important is showing up in the flow of the work of managers on their day-to-day basis. And so what do I mean by that? That means showing up in places like Microsoft Teams. So I may actually find myself requesting feedback on behalf of an employee right through Microsoft Teams. And all that happens without even having to leave or redirect from the Teams application. In addition to Teams and being able to generate feedback as well as conversations in real time, I can also leverage things like Microsoft Outlook. So being able to add agenda topics to any of my upcoming one-on-ones, all without even leaving my Outlook client. So in addition to some of those topics, might be a place for a private note to be added around performance. again, all serving both employee and manager in a continuous but really thoughtful way so that folks can get that continuous coaching throughout the year. I'll invite Jamie to join the stage again so that we'll continue on the next topic, and I'll be back here shortly to show you around a little more.
I'm going to tell you a little story. And it's a good story, I think, because we learn from our successes as well as our failures. And I'm going to tell you probably one of the biggest mistakes I made as an HR practitioner a few years ago, and why it's relevant here. So I had taken on a new global role, head of talent. And the first thing I did was go out for the first 60 days and talk to all the business leaders that I needed to, about 60, 65 of them. And I asked them the question, what is broken right now in our performance? I was talking more about all of the talent processes, but it's still relevant. What's broken and where what needs the most fixing? And of course, for the 65 people, I got 65 different answers about all the things that were broken in HR and all the immediate urgent things that needed to be fixed. And what I realized was I had a laundry list as long as my arm, but I hadn't asked the right question. So I went back. So there was my mistake. Don't make the same mistake as me. And I went back and I asked those same business leaders, what are your biggest business challenges? And how, therefore, can I support in talent management and in performance? How can I support you overcome those challenges? I got a completely different list of business challenges and was able to craft my talent strategy in answer to how do I support the performance challenges that our business leaders are having, and link my talent strategy to an articulation that supported what the business was trying to achieve. Massively different, very much more focused on business outcomes, which I think if that's somewhat confident, I was very confident that after doing that exercise, that the business leaders understood why my talent strategy was relevant to them. What that allowed me to do, therefore, was to get the resources and the budget I needed to help solve business problems. So why must it change? Well, the problem is traditional metrics. If I'm going into a room competing for budget and resources with my C-suite, and I'm focusing on we need a new tool or the process is clunky, I'm not going to get the support that I need. Traditional metrics also, if you think about it from a process perspective, are very backward looking and infrequent. And there's little insight on what kind of impact they're having on the business itself. So the traditional way of measuring our success needs to change. So why do leaders struggle to link to business outcomes? Well, they struggle because outcomes are showing what happened, but not why. The annual signals arrive too late to course correct. And the data that we need, the behavioral data, is missing or invisible. So without these behavioral signals, confidence stays low. So in order to enable performance at scale, leaders need visibility, not more reports. They need visibility. They need early signals so that if you think about our first slide, they're able to pivot and adjust as required, that there's no surprises. And they need insight that they can act on. So Sam, over to you again to show what this looks like in practice.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, so let's talk about how we can enable both our managers as well as our leaders to be really impactful in the moment, as opposed to having to wait until the end of the year and get that final report. So one of those ways, in particular with your managers, we've looked at our goals before, and of course we have a view specific to our direct reports, but our managers here at Betterworks actually keep an entire filter, say, directly pulling out what are the goals on my team that I need to pay attention to. Since these goals are all tracked in real time with a progress bar that indicates how I am pacing, your managers now actually can, with just a pre-saved view, have a priority on those that are falling behind, so they're not pacing well through the period, or that may have not gotten off the ground at all. And so again, when I think about Michelle, our manager, at just one glance at her goals that are at risk or off track, can really start to understand how Brianne needs the attention and extra coaching. In addition to our managers, I did want to take a second and just really recognize the powerful reporting and insights that we do provide around the review process. Of course, HR needs to know who has started the review and who has not started the review. Maybe even more important is the engagement by group. So being able to tap the relevant leaders, make sure that we are being on the microphone about those relevant next steps. But probably, most effective or more important than anything is how can we make sure that both employees and managers have a clear line of sight of what they're accountable for and where they and where we can enable them with more coaching and more direction. And so, of course, we're looking at the current status for the reviews. All of this data comes together to provide the Betterworks users with a really comprehensive workforce analytics dashboard. And so, as Jamie mentioned, the goal work, the coaching and conversations, this is all leading to tangible business outcomes. So now HR has a real-time dashboard into all of the inner workings for their organization, headcount by all of the different metrics that matter to them. And again, probably one of the more useful ones that they're going to be referencing, certainly attrition. And so again, I just wanted to take a second and highlight how we can help managers in the moment know how their team is tracking. That gives them the ability to double down on their coaching and actually have an impact on their goals throughout the year. Of course, HR needs to know in the moment where we are in the process and have the relevant workflows in order to ensure everybody is completing that process. And then at the end, we want to come back to the business with real tangible outcomes. How has the program enabled coaching and the goal setting to a point where we can now again really rest our laurels on some of the tangible business outcomes. I'll now invite my team back onto the stage.
Thanks, appreciate it. So the shift is clear. The idea is to move away from traditional performance management of an evaluation and move to performance enablement, one where we're supporting and empowering our employees. We're helping building and enhancing the coaching capabilities of our managers. And all of this with an idea that HR moves from being this compliance cop of an HR process to one of a cultural and experience designer. All with the notion that performance improves when we make things simple, when we have clarity about what we're supposed to be focusing on, when we give our individuals as well as our managers support, and when we have visibility on what we need to be talking about and focusing on from a business perspective. I'd like to leave you with one last thought, which is something that I think from an HR perspective, it's certainly our vision here at Betterworks, but I'd like you to think about it from an HR perspective, as opposed to being a process owner. And I know some of you run these specific processes, whether it be feedback and recognition, whether it be employee engagement, talent development, performance, succession. In some larger organizations, there may be different groups focusing on each of these. And my prediction is that, because I'm seeing it happening, is that those walls of those processes, those silos in HR are melting down. And that we are now at a place where we can, with the help of AI, start sharing data around each of those different moments in the experience of our employees. And that data only makes it richer for us to be able to help our employees become grow in their development and their growth. The idea here is that instead of thinking about it as different parts of HR, if we think about it as people-centered, and the idea that the employee and the manager are at the center, and that these little bubbles around it each are conversations that are important and make up the overall experience for an employee or a manager, that I think we start shifting this notion that it is one process after another, that our employees have to go through, but rather that HR is helping curate a completely integrated experience for our employees and our managers. With that, I'm going to pass it over.
Thank you so much, Jamie. We are almost right at time. So I just want to start off by saying thank you. Thanks, Sam. Thank you to all the attendees who tuned in. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we hope you all have a great rest of your day.